The moment my styrofoam cup hissed empty halfway through a Monday budget meeting, I knew something was deeply wrong. Because say what you will about this dysfunctional office circus, we always had coffee. Burnt, sure. Tasted like it dripped through a used sock, absolutely. But it worked. It kept the interns from crying and the VPs from killing each other. And it kept me, Marlene, 48, operations manager and single mom who hasn't had a full 8 hours of sleep since Bush left office, from strangling someone with a stapler. But that morning, no refill, no gurgle from the ancient coffee pot. Just a pathetic note taped to the machine. Due to recent cost optimization efforts, coffee service is temporarily suspended. Please enjoy our new hydration stations. Hydration stations mean the 2 crusty water fountains and a lukewarm Brita jug that smells like sadness. I stared at that note like it had personally slapped my mother. I turned to Janet from payroll, who was chewing the end of her glasses like she was trying not to scream. Then the kicker, HR sent out a mass email an hour later, titled, Wellness Over Wants, Why We're Ditching Caffeine Culture. You ever been professionally gaslit by a PDF? Because that's what this was. Bullet points with pastel infographics about reducing reliance on stimulants and fostering a hydration-positive environment. Not one mention of the 14-hour days. We'd pulled the last 3 quarters to bail out the marketing department's screw-ups. Not one word about the raise freeze that's gone on so long we joke about it being fossilized. So yeah, I cracked a joke. Something like, next quarter they'll replace toilet paper with PowerPoint slides about letting go. Everyone laughed, but HR didn't. I got a DM 30 minutes later reminding me that sarcasm creates a hostile work environment. Hostile? Hostile is cutting my caffeine lifeline and handing me cucumber water like I'm at a goddamn spa for people with anxiety-induced IBS. If you're still listening at this point, you're one of the 97% enjoying these stories without smashing that subscribe button or leaving a like. Do it. Seriously. It keeps the coffee hot and the chaos flowing. And more importantly, it tells our small, sleep-deprived team this madness is worth it. Thank you, caffeine comrades. Anyway, I kept my mouth shut after that. Because that's what you do when you're 10 months away from pension vesting and your kid's college fund is being threatened by rising milk prices. I kept showing up, nodding in meetings, taking notes while the CFO, Bryce, human personification of Axe body spray, snickered through his presentation titled Lean Thinking, Trimming Fat from the Office Culture. Trimming fat? Buddy, you just cut the only thing keeping this place from descending into the purge. By lunchtime, the whole office was on edge. Donna from client services stormed into the breakroom with a thermos and screamed, I'm not sharing. Even look at me. Jeff from IT was on the verge of tears trying to make green tea with sink water. The vibes were prison riot meets middle school science fair. And me? I sat at my desk, rereading the HR email, sipping my last emergency K-cup stash like it was aged bourbon. My inbox pinged with another employee wellness survey. I deleted it and opened a spreadsheet. Because somewhere, underneath all the corporate nonsense, I knew this wasn't about coffee anymore. This was about control, and they had just given me one hell of a reason to take some back. The next morning, the email hit like a smug slap with a scented glove. Subject line, a healthier workplace starts today. Right off the bat, you could smell the passive aggression marinated in eucalyptus oil and fake wellness jargon. HR had outdone themselves. It opened with, excited to announce the rollout of our new hydration stations, because your health matters more than your habits. Oh, does it now, Sharon? It went on to describe infused water options that would rotate weekly, starting with orange mint and cucumber lime. There was even a Google form to vote on future flavors, like ginger pear or basil mango. You know what flavor wasn't on the list? Caffeine. You know what wasn't mentioned at all? Productivity, morale, or the fact that we all looked like zombies without our morning fix. And just when I thought we'd reached peak corporate delusion, Bryce, the CFO with the emotional depth of a parking ticket, got up to speak at the all-hands. Look, he smirked, pacing like he was auditioning for a TED talk nobody asked for. If coffee was the only thing motivating you to do your job, maybe it's time to ask yourself, is this the right job for you? The room went silent, like funeral silent. You could practically hear Donna's blood pressure spike from across the room. Bryce chuckled at his own joke and moved on to a slide about cost efficiency wins that showed a cartoon piggy bank farting dollar signs. Real highbrow stuff. I felt the shame creep up my neck like it used to in high school when the teacher read my poem out loud and everyone laughed at the wrong part. It wasn't just the caffeine withdrawal anymore. It was the message. You don't matter. Not your time, not your exhaustion, not your worth. I was wearing the same blouse I wore the day my divorce papers came in the mail. I realized that halfway through the meeting, sitting there in a folding chair while Bryce pitched revenue recalibration. I looked down at the stain on my sleeve, a faded coffee ring from last quarter's inventory panic. I hadn't washed it out. Maybe because some part of me wanted the reminder that things could always get worse. The meeting ended, I didn't clap. Nobody did, really. Just a few awkward chuckles and the sound of people power walking to the break room to grab their sad little lemon waters before they ran out. I didn't go with them. I sat at my desk and stared at the memo again, eyes glazing over bullet points about mindful sipping and hydration mindfulness. The last bullet just said, "Be the change you wish to sip." I almost threw up in my mouth. And then, a weird twist of fate, or karma wearing a Bluetooth headset, my phone buzzed. A text from my brother-in-law Calvin, the guy who used to run Brew Right Supply Co., our longtime coffee vendor before the recent cuts. We hadn't talked in months, not since his distribution contracts tanked, and he started liquidating gear on Facebook Marketplace. "Calvin, hey, got a second? Might be a biz thing. You still at Megaton Corp, right?" I stared at it for a second, ignored it, could have typed back busy maybe later. But I didn't. Instead, I typed, "What's up?" It was one of those tiny decisions that doesn't feel like much in the moment, like ordering fries and a shake. But it shifts something. A gear clicks. A door creaks open. What I didn't know yet was that door led straight into the engine room of their smug little ship. And I was about to start drilling. That afternoon was one long hiss of fluorescent lights and passive-aggressive sighs. The office smelled like cucumber water and desperation. You know how people look when they're grieving? Like their souls are trying to quietly exit through their eyeballs. That was us. An entire floor of caffeine orphans pretending mint-infused hydration was enough to get through quarterly reports. Donna tried to start a revolt in the break room, banging her world's okayest mom mug on the counter and muttering, "They take our coffee, what's next?" Paychecks. Jeff from IT suggested we all pitch in for communal Keurig, but then remembered we weren't allowed to plug anything into unauthorized outlets since the incident with the scented wax warmer that melted the printer. The vents coughed. Someone sneezed into their elbow and whispered, "Kill me." Me? I sat quietly, sipped stale water, bit my tongue until it bled frustration. Because here's the thing, you're a 48-year-old single mom who's clawed her way up from temp to operations manager over the course of 2 marriages, a recession, and 3 rounds of layoffs. You learn when to keep your damn head down. You learn that difficult is a label that sticks harder than a wine stain on beige polyester. And I was so close, just 10 months away from vesting my pension. 10 months from financial breathing room. Couldn't afford to throw it away over something as dumb as well, as vital as coffee. Still, I updated my resume that night, typed it up in bed while the dog snored under the covers, and my daughter texted me from college about needing new tires. I looked at my job history, my skills, my carefully neutered bullet points about streamlining logistics and managing cross-departmental collaboration. It all read like white noise, like a woman who never rocked the boat, never asked for too much, never made anyone uncomfortable. And maybe that's why they thought they could gut our morale like it was a paperclip budget line. The next morning, I ran into Calvin in the parking lot of Kroger. He was climbing out of his van, loading dented boxes of bulk paper towels into the back. Brew Right's logo had been scratched off with what looked like a screwdriver. "Marlene," he squinted. "You still at Megaton?" "Unfortunately," I said, fumbling with my keys, praying this wasn't going to be some weird political rant or a desperate MLM pitch. But instead, he rubbed the back of his neck and sighed. "You guys dropped us like a bad Tinder date. Killed my route. We had 6 contracts cancel after that." I blinked. "You were the main supplier?" He said. "Now I'm trying to offload commercial grinders and 2 pallets of biodegradable cups on Craigslist." I laughed, but it came out hollow. "Want to sell me a latte machine for my cubicle?" He grinned, but then his eyes flicked sideways and he said something that stuck. "You know, contracts like that don't have to die. They just need new skin." "What?" He leaned in like we were co-conspirators in a spy movie instead of 2 burned-out adults in a grocery store parking lot. "I'm liquidating. But the shell company I'm selling to, it's a blank slate. Fresh name, clean brand, same beans." No baggage. If someone wanted to, say, buy in and get back on the vendor list with a markup, I laughed again. Too sharp this time. I'm not a businesswoman, Calvin. I manage budgets and yell at people for using Comic Sans on interdepartmental memos. He shrugged. Just sayin', the overhead's low. Branding's ready. You just need someone with a little righteous anger. I went home with a frozen lasagna and that sentence echoing in my head. Righteous anger. It had a nice ring to it, a country song or a fire you don't realize is spreading until it reaches the attic. I didn't sleep much. I sat on my porch with a glass of red wine cheap enough to strip paint and stared at the stars. I thought about 10 more months of lemon water and performative positivity, about Bryce's smug face, about how this place ran on invisible labor, mine, Donna's, every underpaid soul who dared to care. Buying a coffee company, it was insane. Ridiculous. Definitely a midlife crisis in spreadsheet form. But as I watched my breath fog in the night air, something tugged inside me. Maybe crazy was exactly what they deserved. The transfer happened on a Thursday, quiet and unceremonious, like euthanizing a beloved pet and immediately adopting a replacement with the same name. I wired 22 grand, my emergency fund, my roof leak fund, my oh god the dog ate something fund, into a joint LLC with Calvin, fronted some of the equipment, negotiated with his last bean supplier out of Guatemala, and handed me the reins. And just like that, I became 50% owner of an obscure, rapidly dissolving coffee distributor with no name, no clients, and a warehouse that smelled like dust and abandoned ambition. But that was the old company. The new one? Oh, she had flair. She had ethics. Had the vibe of something you'd find on a Brooklyn brunch menu next to organic hemp toast. Earth Brew Collective. Slogan, sustainably sourced. Radically roasted. Logo, a steaming mug wrapped in 2 hands cradling a planet, designed by my daughter's roommate for $50 and a Chipotle gift card. I set up a barebones website, slapped some buzzwords into a mission statement: micro-lot harvesting, zero-waste roasting, mindful caffeine, kind of language that gives middle managers spiritual orgasms. Calvin helped me set up the shipping backend. I registered the LLC with an out-of-state address to keep the trail cold, bought a burner phone, made a new Gmail. Then came the fun part. Vendor review season. Megaton Corp had a procurement cycle so bloated and inefficient it practically begged for manipulation. Every quarter, department heads sent out RFQs, requests for quotes, diversify supplier options. It was usually a meaningless dance. The lowest bidder got the job unless a higher bidder brought added value, which nobody ever defined clearly. I submitted Earth Brew's bid the day after the RFQs dropped. It was aggressive. Not criminal, but enough to raise an eyebrow, 3 times what Brew Right had charged. I buried the cost in certified compostable delivery materials and direct trade premium microblends with employee wellness incentives. Hell, I even included an office mindfulness onboarding packet with a gratitude journal printable. I watched the email leave my outbox like a match flying toward a gasoline puddle. 2 weeks passed. Then, a Tuesday morning, sitting at my desk, pretending to care about PowerPoint fonts, I got the ping. Earth Brew Collective subject. Approved vendor notice Megaton Corp. I read it 3 times before the words stopped swimming. We got the contract. Bryce didn't even blink. He proudly announced at the next budget meeting, "Coffee's back, baby." Thanks to some very savvy vendor negotiations, we've secured a premium supplier that aligns with our corporate values. I wanted to stand up and scream, "You mean me, you overpaid cologne goblin." But instead, I smiled into my lukewarm water cup like a woman keeping a very delicious secret. Within 48 hours, Earth Brew was back in the building. Barista-grade beans, sleek, reusable thermoses. The Breakroom suddenly looked like a Pinterest board titled Minimalist Bliss. People were happy again. Donna cried actual tears when she smelled Colombian roast wafting through the vents. Jeff made a Slack emoji of our logo and called me his coffee goddess, not knowing I was the literal queen behind the curtain. The invoices rolled in. $9.75 per pound. Triple the cost. Approved without a whisper. I tracked every receipt, every glowing HR memo about employee revitalization. Each one a bullet in my chamber. I'd built the whole thing legally, quietly, with just enough shell games to make sure if they did trace it back, they'd hit paperwork that looped like a corporate fever dream. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a cog. I felt like the hand spinning the damn machine. The day the first Earth Brew delivery rolled in, the office erupted like we'd just won the Super Bowl, if the Super Bowl had been sponsored by Colombian dark roast and biodegradable stir sticks. The Breakroom, once a wasteland of sadness and lukewarm citrus water, transformed overnight. Shiny silver canisters with laser-etched logos, bulk bags stamped with inspirational phrases like brew boldly and grounded in purpose. Someone even lit a vanilla bean candle like we were about to conduct a séance for productivity. Donna took one sip and clutched her chest. "I can feel again," she whispered. Jeff declared, "This isn't just coffee. This is church." And Bryce strutted through the cubicles like he'd personally harvested the beans using the power of his own executive brilliance. He beamed during a town hall. "Morale's up, productivity's stabilizing. Sometimes you have to take things away just to appreciate them. Smart management is about timing." Oh, he was practically polishing his own halo. I sat in the back row, sipped a perfect medium roast that technically I had provided, and took notes. Not about the meeting, about the lies, about the cost-cutting initiative that had just tripled their monthly coffee expenses without a single board member batting an eye. About the speech Bryce gave 2 quarters ago titled "Coffee is a Crutch, Reimagining Corporate Resilience." I kept everything, every invoice, every receipt, every smug email. I built a folder, encrypted, backed up, stored in 3 locations. I called it Caffeine Gate because petty keeps me warm at night. I made spreadsheets detailing the before and after costs. I tracked staff turnover trends against caffeine availability. Even the number of HR complaints dropped since Earth Brew rolled in, and I had the graphs to prove it. I wasn't just playing the game anymore, I was building the evidence to flip the whole board. But as always, nothing gold stays fresh roasted. About a month in, finance started poking the beast. It began as whispers, emails forwarded to the wrong inbox, Slack messages left open on shared screens. Questions like, "Why are we spending so much on Breakroom supplies? And who approved this vendor?" I knew it was coming. Triple markups don't hide forever, no matter how compostable the packaging is. Still, Bryce brushed it off. At the next leadership huddle, he waved a hand and laughed. "Listen, nobody cares about a few extra bucks if morale's up. We're not running a soup kitchen, running a machine, and coffee is the oil." I noted the quote, "future exhibit material," but cracks were forming. Procurement pinged HR about reviewing vendor contracts. Internal audits requested line-by-line breakdowns of operational expenses. It was all routine for now, but it smelled like someone upstream was finally sniffing the rot under Bryce's lavender-scented spreadsheets. And yet, I couldn't help but feel good. Empowered, like I had built a Trojan horse out of hemp filters and single-origin espresso, and they had rolled it right into the heart of their self-righteous empire. Was it wrong? Maybe. Did I feel guilty? A little. But then I'd watch Bryce wink at interns or brag about redefining office culture, and the guilt would evaporate faster than cheap French roast in a microwave mug. Let them poke. Let them prod. I had contingencies. I had receipts. I had leverage. Most importantly, I had time. Because while the CFO boasted and finance fretted, Earth Brew was quietly expanding, one overpriced invoice at a time. The email hit my burner account like a shot of ice water down the spine. Subject: immediate review cost concerns from Bryce Hollander at Megaton Corpcom to Earth Brew Collective at Proton Mailcom to whom it may concern. A procurement team has identified a significant cost increase associated with your services. While employee satisfaction metrics have improved, the board is beginning to scrutinize all expenses. If we cannot reach a revised agreement that reflects more competitive pricing, we will be forced to terminate the contract immediately. Regards, Bryce Hollander, CFO, Megaton Corp. The irony. The actual gall of this man, threatening to pull the plug on the very thing he used as his turnaround success story at last week's executive lunch. But this wasn't just a power play. This was Bryce realizing he'd signed off on something he didn't understand and now needed someone to blame when the numbers started bleeding red. I stared at the screen, my pulse slamming against my throat. I'd played it clean, on paper. The LLCs were separate. Calvin handled customer service. My name didn't appear on anything public-facing. But fear doesn't care about legal protection. It digs into your gut like a hook and yanks every time the phone buzzes or the doorbell rings unexpectedly. I texted Calvin, "We need to prep an exit ramp. This is getting loud." Calvin, already working on a plan B. But hey, this is what winning looks like, right? Me. Feels more like the scene before the hero dies. He didn't reply. 2 days later, HR summoned everyone to the conference room for an urgent budget clarification meeting, which is corporate for we're about to blame you for our mistakes. The projector blinked to life. Charts, graphs, pie slices showing discretionary spending spikes. In big red font, one bar towered over the rest like a middle finger. Breakroom supplies Q2 increase. 218%. Bryce stood at the front, sleeves rolled to his elbows like he just finished solving world hunger with Excel. Folks, he said, I know you've enjoyed the return of coffee culture, but some luxuries may not be sustainable long term. We're entering a phase of lean recalibration. I almost laughed. Lean recalibration? You mean undoing your own dumb decisions and pretending it's leadership? Donna raised her hand. So what? We go back to lemon water and resentment? Bryce smirked. Let's just say, exploring more affordable partnerships. A hush fell over the room. The coffee had become more than just a beverage. It was a symbol of sanity, of routine, of someone finally giving a damn. After the meeting, people circled me like I was a priest at a funeral. Donna grabbed my arm in the hallway. This place is circling the drain. Just come back already. You were the only one who made it bearable. Jeff added, yeah. Since you left ops, it's been like a substitute teacher who's drunk on power and bad cologne. I forced a smile. I'm consulting now. Freelance, you know how it goes. But their words hit harder than I expected. Because the truth was, I did miss the work. The control, the fire alarms, the endless broken label printers. There was something weirdly sacred about being the one who kept the wheels from flying off. And now I was hiding behind burner emails and shell corporations, while the company unraveled under the weight of its own smugness. Back at home, I opened the Earth Brew financials. We were profitable, insanely so, but the margin wasn't worth it if it all collapsed under a single audit. I stared at the coffee bags stacked in Calvin's garage. They used to smell like success. Now they smelled like a gamble I couldn't afford to lose. If Bryce pulled the contract, I wouldn't just lose the business. I'd lose my savings, my pension timing, and maybe my chance to ever work in ops again. And worse, if they found out who Earth Brew really was, it wouldn't just be Bryce going down in flames. It'd be me too. The hammer dropped on a gray Tuesday morning, one of those Ohio days where the sky looks like drier lint, and even the sun doesn't feel like showing up for work. I was microwaving day-old oatmeal when I saw the internal leak. A screenshot forwarded by Donna, titled simply, "You'll want to see this. Someone's stirring the pot." Attached was an internal board memo, marked confidential, circulated at the top of the food chain. An anonymous report has been submitted highlighting significant discrepancies in Megaton's reported cost-saving initiatives versus actual expenditures. A side-by-side timeline of procurement memos, Breakroom invoices, and CFO-led budget presentations. And there it was, every lie Bryce had spun laid out in brutal chronological clarity. Slide 1, his smug lean thinking deck from Q1. Slide 2, Earth Brew's itemized invoices showing a 3x markup starting weeks later. Slide 3, staff satisfaction surveys used to justify the investment, all dated after the new pricing kicked in. Anonymous sender had color-coded the receipts. Red ink, yellow highlights, blue arrows pointing directly at Bryce's initials on the approvals. They didn't just want him exposed, they wanted him eaten alive. I paced my living room, oatmeal forgotten, heart punching through my ribs like it owed me money. Calvin called 30 minutes later. You see it? Yeah. Still think we're invisible? Nope. Then came the second hit. An intern in marketing, a fluff piece for the internal newsletter, had tried to pitch a feel-good story about Earth Brew's vendor vision. She'd found a blog. A tiny coffee enthusiast site I started 2 years ago to rant about office machines and single-origin beans. Barely updated, but still linked to my real name in the About section. And there, in a March post titled Why Workplaces Deserve Better Coffee, I had waxed poetic about flavor profiles, and like an idiot, mentioned Megaton by name. She flagged it innocently enough, sent it up to communications for possible vendor spotlight, which meant it got passed to legal, which meant the audit team now had their teeth sunk in. I killed the site in under 10 minutes, scrubbed my LinkedIn, and called Calvin. They're going to dig. They're already digging, he said. I've got 2 voicemails from blocked numbers and someone named Compliance Oversight Lead. Sounds like a person who eats whistleblowers for breakfast. I sat down, head in my hands, oatmeal congealing beside me like a metaphor. This was it. End game. If they traced Earth Brew back to me, they'd crucify me in a boardroom. Not just for the profit, but for the optics. The betrayal. The audacity of pulling off the kind of scheme they'd brag about in TED talks if it had come from a man in a Patagonia vest named Chad. But then, under the anxiety, under the doom, something else stirred, defiance. I hadn't stolen. I hadn't broken contracts. I hadn't embezzled or falsified a single invoice. Everything Earth Brew charged had been approved by Bryce himself. I hadn't hidden a flaw in the system. I was the flaw in their assumptions. They thought I'd roll over, that I'd vanish, that I wouldn't dare. I closed my laptop, heart still slamming, and stared out the window. The street was wet. A squirrel darted across the power line like it had somewhere important to be. I took a deep breath, grabbed my folder labeled receipts, and pulled it into my lap. If they were going to come for me, they'd better bring more than red pens and empty platitudes, because I was done hiding. And I had one hell of a story to tell. The boardroom was cold. Not emotionally, literally. Someone must have cranked the AC to death by glacier, which felt appropriate given the frost hanging in the air between Bryce and the 5 board members glaring at him like he'd farted in a baptismal font. I was sitting in the hallway just outside, folder in hand, dressed in the sharpest black blazer I owned, thrift store find, but no one needed to know that. My stomach was a wreck, coiled and sour, but my face was still. Still like I'd spent a lifetime watching men talk themselves out of accountability. Through the glass wall, I watched Bryce work his magic. That fake charm voice turned up to 11, hands moving like he was conducting a symphony of bullshit. I had no knowledge of the vendor's back-end structure, he said, all wounded innocence. Procurement approved it based on staff morale metrics. My role was minimal. One of the board members, a gray-haired woman with a stare that could break cinder blocks, held up an Earth Brew invoice. This is your signature, Bryce. Push this through as an emergency morale expense bypassing standard vendor vetting. You bragged about it at the last QBR. I was operating under pressure to improve performance. He snapped. I used what tools I had. Your tools cost this company $147,000 over budget in Q2 alone, another board member said, and your personal coffee allowance tripled during that time. We checked. Bryce's jaw twitched. That's when the door opened. One of them called, not even looking up. Would you step in? I stood, adjusted my folder, walked past Bryce as he turned and saw me, eyes narrowing like he couldn't decide if he was shocked or furious. I didn't give him the satisfaction of eye contact. The chair closest to the end of the table was empty. I slid into it, placed my folder neatly in front of me, and said, calm as a dawn before a tornado, would you like me to walk you through the timeline? Just start with the vendor approval form Bryce signed. The silence was holy. One board member gave a small, barely perceptible nod. So I began. I laid it out like a surgeon. No fluff, no emotion. Just a precise accounting of every step. Brew rights abrupt termination, Earth Brew's founding, the approved markups, the inflated morale scores Bryce had weaponized as justification. The emails he'd sent to HR praising the culture boost, procurement team's greenlighting of expenses that he'd personally routed under strategic morale realignment. I ended with a copy of Earth Brew's legal formation and a printout of Ohio's LLC protection laws, highlighted. I did not lie, I said, finally looking at Bryce. I formed a company. I sold a product you agreed to buy. I followed every rule this corporation put in place, when those rules allowed a man like you to inflate his own clout on the back of something he didn't understand. I let the system work exactly as it was designed. Bryce exploded. She set me up. This is sabotage. She's a traitor. No, I said, standing. I'm just good at logistics. He lunged toward the folder, my folder, and 2 security guards who'd been sitting quietly in the corner like bored shadows suddenly weren't bored anymore. They stepped forward, hands guiding him away from the table. You'll hear from my attorney. Bryce yelled over his shoulder, eyes wild. Looking forward to it, I said without blinking. The door shut behind him with a muffled thud. No one spoke for a few beats. Then the gray-haired board member turned to me. Miss Allen, how would you feel about helping us fix the rest of this mess? And right then, somewhere deep behind the adrenaline, I felt it. Something warm, slow-burning, just beneath the surface. Not vengeance. Power. Bryce was gone by the end of the week, escorted out with a banker's box, a pale face, and the same $400 loafers he used to prop up on the boardroom table like he owned the oxygen in it. Word around the office was he tried to blame the whole thing on a rogue vendor operation. But when the audit team finished their report, it read more like a comedy roast with legal footnotes. The internal memo was short, almost poetic. Chief Financial Officer Bryce Hollander has resigned effective immediately to pursue other opportunities. We thank him for his service. Translation: don't let the Keurig hit you on the way out, buddy. HR didn't fare much better. Turns out approving morale initiatives without proper oversight, especially ones built on fake wellness metrics and bulk chai lattes, doesn't play well with the board when your entire department is already under scrutiny for toxic culture reviews. 2 senior reps were restructured into sudden retirement. Sharon from HR, last seen handing out LinkedIn profile tips at Panera Bread. And me, they gave me a standing ovation. No confetti, but the CFO's empty chair was a good enough trophy. I stood at the head of the boardroom, no longer the woman who managed toner levels and screamed internally at budget misallocations. I was Marlene Allen, efficiency consultant, complete with a 6-figure contract, stock options, and my own office with a door that shut both ways. The gray-haired board member leaned in and said, "You were the only one who understood value. Not just numbers, people, purpose." I nodded, smiled. Let them think it was about ethics. Truth was, it started with rage. It ended with empire. My first executive act, replacing every crusty single-pot brewer in the building with top-of-the-line espresso stations. Foam wands, cold brew taps, custom mugs, all stamped with Earth Brew's new slogan, "Revolution Roasted Daily." Even better, the invoice was at a discounted rate, but only just enough to look generous. Staff morale soared. Donna cried again. Jeff said the cortado made him believe in God. A month later, got a call from facilities management in the tower across the street. They'd heard about Earth Brew, loved the branding, asked if we were open to corporate supply contracts. "We're franchising now," I said, casually flipping through our expansion model while sipping a macchiato in a leather chair that cost more than my first car. The truth was, I didn't need their approval anymore. Not their water cooler wellness cult, not their passive-aggressive memos, and definitely not their permission. They canceled my coffee, so I sold it back to them in bulk and then sold it to everyone else on the block. Guess who's addicted now? You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.